Somebody rang up today and asked to speak to me. And when I got to the phone, whoever it was just hung up. In a way, that's rather odd. Oh, yes, and that man who came the other day to buy some furniture, he was a horsey sort of man in a check suit. He wanted to buy that desk. I told him, of course, that it wasn't ours to sell, but he simply didn't believe me. He offered a very large sum, far more than it's worth.
Interesting. These things sometimes have a secret drawer.
Yes, this one has, but there's nothing very exciting in it, only some old autographs.
Yes, Jones.
I've examined the car, sir. There's a pair of gloves on the driving seat, registration book in the side pocket.
Oliver Costello, 27 Morgan Mansions, SW3. Was a man called Costello here this evening?
Yes, he was here at about 6:30.
Friend of yours?
No, I wouldn't call him a friend. I had met him once or twice. It's, rather...
Well, perhaps I had better explain, Inspector. It concerns the first Mrs. Hersham Brown. There was a divorce just over a year ago, and recently she married Oliver Costello.
I see. And, Mr. Costello came here this evening, why, by appointment?
Oh, no. As a matter of fact, when Miranda left, she took with her one or two things that weren't really hers. Oliver happened to be in this part of the world, and he just dropped in to return them.
What kind of things?
Oh, nothing very important. This was one of them. It belonged to my husband's mother. He values it for sentimental reasons.
How long did Mr. Costello remain?
Oh, a very short time. He said he was in a hurry. About 10 minutes.
And your interview was quite amicable?
Oh, yes. I thought it was very kind of him to look in to return the things.
Did he mention where he was going when he left here?
No. Oh, actually, he went out by that window. As a matter of fact, my lady gardener, Miss Peake, was here, and she offered to show him out through the garden.
Your gardener? Does she live on the premises?
Yes, she lives in the cottage.
I think I'd better have a word with her. Jones?
Oh, there is a telephone connection through to the cottage. Shall I get it for you, Inspector?
Well, if you'd be so kind, Mrs. Hilson Brown.
Not at all. I don't suppose she'll have gone to bed yet. Oh, hello, Miss Peake. This is Mrs. Hilton Brown. Yes. Something rather important has happened. I wonder if you could come over for a moment. Oh, yes, that will be all right. Thank you. She's been washing her hair, but she'll dress and come right over.
The question is, why is Oliver Costello's car still here, and where is Mr. Costello? Apparently, Miss Peake was the last person to see him. He left, you say, by that window. Did you lock it after him?
No.
Oh.
I don't think so.
So he may have returned that way. I think, with your permission, Mrs. Hilton Brown, I'd like to search the house.
Oh, of course. Well, you've seen this room. Nobody could be hidden here. Through here is the library. Would you like to go in there?
Oh, thank you. Jones. Just see where that door leads to, Jones.
Right you are, sir. Just through to the hall, sir.
Right. Now we'll search the rest of the house.
Oh, I'll come with you if you don't mind, in case my stepdaughter should wake up and be frightened. Not that I think she will. It's extraordinary how deeply children sleep. Have you got any children, Inspector?
Boy and a girl?
Oh, isn't that nice? Mr. Jett?
If you ask me, there's only one thing to do. Come clean, own up before it is too late.
Derek, we can't do that. It'd be too unfair to Clarissa.
We'll get her in a far worse mess if we carry on like this. I mean, how are we going to get rid of the body? The police will impound the fellow's car.
We'll use mine.
But I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I mean, I'm a local JP. Now, what do you think, Brody? I mean, you've got a good level head.
Personally, I'm committed to the enterprise.
Well, I don't understand you.
Well, take it on trust, Hugo, if you will. Now, listen. Once the police are satisfied that Oliver Costello is not in this house, they'll go away and look elsewhere. I don't see why suspicion should attach itself to any of us. We're all respectable people. Hugo's a JP, Henry's in the Foreign Office.
And I take it that you've had a blameless and even distinguished career.
Exactly.
All right. We're bracing it out.
Can't we do something about that straight away?
No time. They'll be back in a minute, safer where it is.
I must say, Clarissa's a marvel. Doesn't turn her hair. She's got that police inspector reaching out of her hand.
Oh, that'll be Miss Peake. Better go and let her in, Warren.
Evening, Miss Peake.
Oh, good evening, Mr. Warren.
I think you'd better come in here.
Oh. I say, what is all this? Mrs. Helchenbrown was most mysterious on the phone. Has anything happened?
I'm sorry you've been routed out like this, Miss Peake. Won't you sit down?
Oh, yes.
The fact is, we've got the police here.
The police? Has there been a burglary?
Well, no, not exactly.
Oh, Inspector, this is Miss Peake.
Good evening, Miss Peake.
Oh, good evening, Inspector. I was just asking Sir Roland. Has there been a burglary or what?
We received a rather peculiar telephone call, and we think you could probably clear up the matter for us. It concerns a Mr. Oliver Costello.
Never heard of him.
Well, he was here this evening visiting Mrs. Hailsham-Brown, and I believe you showed him out through the garden.
Oh, that man. Oh, yes, I believe Mrs. Hailsham-Brown did mention his name. What about him?
I'd like you to tell me exactly what happened and when you last saw him.
Well, I showed him out through that window, and I asked him if he wanted a bus, and he said no, he'd come in his car.
That was the last you saw of him.
Yes, why?
His car's still here. We received a telephone call at 7:49 saying a man had been murdered at Coppleston Court.
Murdered? Here? Ridiculous.
That's what everyone seems to think.
Well, of course, I know there's all these maniacs about attacking women, but you say a man was murdered.
You didn't hear a car this evening?
Well, only Mr. Hailsham-Brown.
Mr. Hailsham-Brown? I thought he wasn't expected back until late.
Oh, my husband came home, but he went out again almost immediately.
Oh, is that so? Exactly when did he come back?
Oh, let me see, about...
Oh, it was about a quarter of an hour before I went off duty. Yes, I work a lot of overtime, Inspector. I'll be keen on a job, that's what I say. Yes, it was about 7:15 when Mr. Hailsham-Brown got in.
Shortly after Mr. Costello left. They probably passed each other.
Oh, you mean he may have come back to see Mr. Hailsham-Brown?
Oliver definitely didn't come back to the house.
Ah, but you can't be sure of that, Mrs. Hailsham-Brown. I mean, he might have got through that window without you knowing it. Golly, you don't suppose he murdered Mr. Hailsham-Brown? I say, I am sorry.
Of course he didn't murder Henry.
Where did your husband go when he left here?
I've no idea.
Well, doesn't he usually say where he's going?
Oh, I never ask questions. I always think it must be so boring for a man if his wife is always asking him questions.
How stupid of me. If that man's car's still here, he must be the one who's been murdered.
Oh, but Miss Peake, we have no reason to believe that anybody's been murdered. In fact, the Inspector thinks it was all some silly hoax.
Oh, with that car. I do think that car's very suspicious, you know. Have you looked about for a body?
The Inspector has already searched the house.
I'm sure those Elgins had something to do with it. I've had my suspicions of them for a long time. Have you searched their quarters? Now, listen. Supposing that man, Mr. Costello, recognized Elgin as a man with a criminal record, he might decide to come back and warn Mrs. Hailsham-Brown, and Elgin assaulted him. Then, of course, he'd have to get rid of the body somewhere quickly so that he could dispose of it later in the night. Now, where do you suppose he'd hide the body? I wonder. Behind the curtain?
Oh, really, Miss Peake, there isn't anybody hidden behind any of the curtains, and I'm sure Elgin would never murder anybody. It's quite ridiculous.
Oh, but you're so trusting, Mrs. Hailsham-Brown. When you're my age, you'll realize that people are often not quite what they seem. Where would a man like Elgin hide the body? Oh, well, of course, there's that cupboard place between here and the library. I mean, you've looked there, I suppose.
The Inspector has looked both here and in the library.
Just what do you mean by that cupboard place, Miss Peake?
Oh, it's a wonderful place when you're playing sardines. You never dream it was there. I'll show you.
No, there isn't anybody there now. I know, because I went through to the library that way just now.
Oh, well, in that case...
Just show me all the same. I'd like to see.
Well, it was a door originally. It matched that one over there. I'll show you. Now, you pull this catch here, and the door swings open. You see? Ah! Ah! Oh! Oh! Oh!
Jones?
Oh! Oh! Oh!
So there was a murder here tonight. Yes, we'll need photographs. Yes, the whole bag of tricks. Better not move the body till they've taken the photographs. Not that that will tell us anything. He wasn't killed there. He was put there afterwards. You can see where his feet have dragged.
How are you feeling?
Better.
Might be as well to close the bookcase door. We don't want any more hysteria.
Yes, indeed, too. Inspector, Mrs. Hersham-Brown's had a very nasty shock. I think she ought to go to her room and lie down.
Certainly, sir. In a moment or two. I'd just like to ask her a few questions first.
Oh, she's not fit to be questioned.
No, I'm all right, really I am.
But I think it's wiser not.
Oh, dear Uncle Rowley, he's so sweet to me always.
Yes, I can see that.
Do ask me anything you want to, Inspector, though actually, I can't help you, I'm afraid, because I just don't know anything at all.
Would you join the other gentleman, please, sir?
Well, I think I'd better
I'll
remain.
call you if it should be necessary.
Dear Uncle Rowley, he always wants to spare me everything.
Now, Mrs. Hailsham-Brown, you had no idea that there was a body in that recess.
No, of course not. Oh, it's horrible, quite horrible.
When we were searching this room just now, why didn't you draw our attention to that recess?
Do you know, the thought never struck me. You see, we never used it, so it never came into my head.
But you said you'd just been through that way into the library.
Oh, no, I think you must have misunderstood me. What I meant was that door.
I certainly misunderstood you. Now, you've no idea when Oliver Costello came back here, or what he came for.
I simply can't imagine.
Perhaps to see your husband?
Oh, no, I'm sure he didn't. You see, Henry and he never liked each other.
Oh, had there been a quarrel between them?
Oh, no, they hadn't quarrelled. It was just that Henry thought he wore the wrong shoes. You know how odd men are.
He didn't come back here to see you.
Me? Oh, no, I'm sure he didn't.
Is there anybody else in the house he might have wanted to see?
I can't think who. I mean, who is there?
Oliver Costello comes here, returns the articles which the first Mrs. Hailsham-Brown had taken away. He says goodbye. Then he comes back here, presumably through that window. He's killed. His body's pushed into that recess, all in the space of about 10, 20 minutes, and nobody hears anything.
I know, it's extraordinary, isn't it?
Are you sure you didn't hear anything?
Quite sure. It really is fantastic.
Almost too fantastic. That's all, Mrs. Hailsham-Brown. Not that way.
Oh, I think really I'd rather join the others.
Later. What about the other woman, Miss Peake?
I put her on the spare room bed, sir. Terrible time I had with it. Laughing and crying, something terrible she was, sir.
Doesn't matter if Mrs. H.B. talks to her, but not to those three there. You locked the door from the library into the hall.
Oh, yes, sir, I've got the key here.
Good. Now, we'll have them in one at a time. Oh, but first I'd like to speak to that butler chap.
Elgin.
Yes. Call him in. I've got a feeling he knows something.
Yes, indeed, sir. Elgin, come you in here, please.
Sit down, Elgin. Now, you started off with the pictures this evening, but you came back. Why was that?
I've told you before, sir. My wife wasn't feeling very well.
It was you who let Costello into the house when he came this evening.
Yes, sir.
Why didn't you tell us at once that it was his car outside?
Because I didn't know, sir. Mr. Costello didn't drive up to the front door. I didn't know that he'd come in a car.
Rather peculiar, eh?
Yes, sir. I expect he had his reasons.
Just what do you mean by that?
Nothing, sir. Nothing at all.
Ever seen this man Costello before?
Never, sir.
How long have you been with Mrs. Hailsham-Brown?
6 weeks, sir.
Before that?
I'd been having a little rest.
A rest. You realize that in a case like this, your references will have to be looked into very carefully.
Would that be all, sir? I wouldn't wish to deceive you, sir. It wasn't anything really wrong, you see. Well, the original references having got torn, I couldn't quite remember the wording.
So you wrote them yourself? That's what it comes to?
Well, I didn't mean any harm. I've got my living to
At the moment, I'm not interested in fake references. I want to know what happened here tonight and what you know about Oliver Costello.
Never set eyes on him before. I've a good idea why he came here.
Oh? Why?
Blackmail. He had something on her.
On Mrs. Hailsham-Brown?
Yes, I came in here to ask if anything was wanted, and I heard her say, "But that's blackmail, and I'll not submit to it."